After offering to help renovate their house, my father said, "Don't think having money makes you better." Instead of the transfer, I bought myself a new car. Now they live with a leaking roof. You know how they say money changes people? Well, sometimes, it's not the ones with the money who change. Let me tell you about how my parents learned a lesson they won't forget anytime soon. So I landed this killer promotion at work about 6 months ago. We're talking serious money, the kind that lets you upgrade from ramen to actual steak, you know? First thing I thought about wasn't some vacation or shopping spree. Nah, I thought about my folks and their house that's been falling apart since I was in high school. Their place is an old craftsman style that could be gorgeous with some TLC, but my parents have always been the tape and glue type when it comes to repairs. The roof's been leaking for years, the plumbing makes these death rattle sounds, and don't even get me started on the electrical situation. Total fire hazard waiting to happen. I grew up watching them struggle to make ends meet. Dad worked at the same factory for 30 years, and Mom picked up shifts at Walmart when things got tight. They never had extra cash for renovations, just patches and quick fixes. I get it, I really do. But now I had the means to help them out. So I swing by their place one Sunday, driving my beat-up 2010 Corolla that's seen better days. Dad's out front fussing with the gutters, same ones that have been sagging for a decade. I park and walk over, helping him steady the ladder. "Hey Dad, careful up there," I call out. "That ladder looks about as stable as the economy," he grunts, climbing down carefully. "Been using this ladder since before you were born. Still works fine." That's Dad in a nutshell. If it ain't completely broken, don't replace it. And sometimes even if it is completely broken, just duct tape it and pretend it's fine. We head inside where Mom's making her famous pot roast. The kitchen is exactly the same as it was when I left for college. Same faded yellow countertops, same leaky faucet that's now wrapped with even more plumber's tape. "Smells amazing in here," I say, giving Mom a hug. She looks tired. More tired than a mom should look on a Sunday. "Just the usual," she says, but smiles. "How's the big shot doing?" I roll my eyes. "Hardly a big shot, just finally making decent money." We sit down to eat, and I decide it's time to make my offer. I've already crunched the numbers. I can spare about $25,000 for the most critical repairs. Roof first, then plumbing, then electrical. I've even talked to a contractor buddy who gave me a decent quote. "So," I say, trying to sound casual while passing the mashed potatoes, "I've been thinking, that roof's not getting any younger." Dad sighs. "Tell me about it. Got 3 new buckets in the hallway after that storm last week." "Well, I'd like to help with that. And not just the roof. I can cover some renovations, the important stuff at least. I've already talked to Mike Riley. You remember him? He's a contractor now. Gave me a good quote." The table goes quiet. Mom's fork is frozen, halfway to her mouth. That's very generous, honey," she finally says, glancing at Dad. Dad's not looking at either of us. He's staring at his plate like it personally offended him. I can see the muscle in his jaw working. "Dad?" He finally looks up, and man, if looks could kill, we don't need handouts. "It's not a handout," I say. "It's me helping my parents. The roof is literally falling apart." "We've managed just fine all these years," he says, stabbing a piece of pot roast. "We don't need our kids swooping in to save the day." Mom tries to smooth things over. "What your father means is, I know exactly what I mean." Dad cuts her off. "Don't think having money suddenly makes you better than us." There it was. The real issue. Not the money itself, but what he thought it meant about our relationship, about who I thought I was now. I didn't respond. What could I say? That I just wanted to help? That I hated seeing them live like this when I could do something about it? That his pride was literally keeping a roof with holes over their heads? Instead, I just nodded, swallowed my pot roast, and changed the subject to the Seahawks' chances this season. But something shifted in me that night. Update. So this blew up while I was at work. Thanks for all the comments and messages. A lot of you are asking if I confronted my dad after dinner or tried to explain. I didn't. That's not how things work in our family. We swallow feelings like they're pills. But what I did next? That's where things get interesting. Also, some people are asking if my parents helped me financially in the past. Let's just say college was all student. Loans and 3 jobs. More details coming after my meeting. Driving home from my parents' place, I kept hearing Dad's words on repeat. "Don't think having money suddenly makes you better than us." The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Better than them? When had I ever acted like that? All I wanted to do was fix their damn roof. I remembered all the times growing up when I needed something. New soccer cleats for the team, a graphing calculator for calculus, money for the class trip to Washington, D.C. Each time the answer was the same. We don't have it. Make do. And I did make do. I bought used cleats from a kid a grade above me. I borrowed calculators and stayed after school to finish assignments. I watched my friends post DC photos on Facebook while I worked extra shifts at McDonald's. My parents weren't bad people. They just never had extra. But they also never seemed to want better for themselves, even when they could manage it. The tax return money that could have fixed the bathroom sink went to a fishing boat Dad barely used. Mom's small inheritance from Grandma went to a timeshare in Florida they visited exactly twice. 2 days after that dinner, I made a decision. I'd been planning to transfer the renovation money that weekend. Instead, I drove to the Ford dealership and test drove a Mustang GT. Candy apple red, black interior, purrs like a dream. I'd always wanted one, but it seemed too flashy, too impractical. You know what? Screw practical. I signed the papers that afternoon. $35,000 more than I'd planned for the renovations, but with my new salary and bonus, I could handle the payments. I sent a picture to my best friend Jess with just the caption, "Meet the new me." She called immediately. "Holy crap, since when are you a Mustang girl?" "Since now," I said, running my hand over the dashboard. "Life's too short to drive boring cars." "This wouldn't have anything to do with your parents, would it?" Jess knows me too well. "Nope," I lied, just treating myself. That weekend, my phone lit up with Mom's name. I hesitated before answering, wondering if she'd somehow found out about the car already. "Hey, Mom." "Hi, honey. I was just wondering." She paused. "You mentioned helping with the renovations?" "Dad and I talked, and well, the roof really does need fixing. The contractor you mentioned, Mike, he came by yesterday to give us an estimate." So Dad had swallowed his pride when I wasn't around to witness it. Typical. "Actually," I said, my heart pounding, "I decided not to be better than you guys after all. I spent the money on myself, like you always did." Silence. Then, "What are you talking about?" "I bought a car. A Mustang, actually." More silence. Then, her voice, tight with anger. "But you promised. The roof's leaking in 3 places now. We had a plan." "We didn't have anything, Mom." Dad made it pretty clear he didn't want my help. "He was just being proud. You know how he is." "Yeah, I do know how he is." "Buy a tarp," I suggested and hung up. Was it petty? Absolutely. Childish? For sure. But for once in my life, I'd chosen myself over my parents' drama, and it felt strangely liberating. The next day, I drove the Mustang by their house, slow enough to be noticed, but not slow enough to be stopped. Dad was in the yard placing buckets strategically under the eaves. He looked up as I passed, recognition dawning on his face as he realized who was behind the wheel of the flashy new sports car. I didn't stop, didn't wave, just cruised by, music playing, sunglasses on, feeling like a different person entirely. For the next few weeks, my parents didn't call. I didn't call them either. But I heard through my aunt that the roof was getting worse. A particularly heavy rainfall had caused part of the ceiling in their bedroom to collapse. They were sleeping in the living room now. Still, I couldn't bring myself to reach out. Every time I thought about it, I remembered all the times I'd needed them and had to figure things out on my own. Why should this be any different? Update. Wow, this really divided the comments. Section. Team, "You're a jerk" versus team, "Your dad deserved it." Fair enough on both counts. For those asking if I regret my decision, complicated feelings there. I drove by their place again yesterday and saw them putting plastic sheeting on the roof with my uncle. It didn't feel as satisfying as I thought it would. But there's more to this story, including what happened when my brother, who doesn't know the whole situation, called me yesterday. Am I the villain in this story? Maybe. But stay tuned. About a month after the Mustang incident, my brother Ryan called. He lives in Chicago and isn't around much, so he had no idea about any of this drama. "Hey, just talked to Mom," he said. "What's this about their roof?" She was being weird about it. I took a deep breath and told him everything. The offer, Dad's rejection, my car purchase, Mom's angry call. "Jesus," Ryan said when I finished. "That's a lot. Whose side are you on?" I asked defensively. "I don't think there are sides here, just a bunch of stubborn people who can't communicate." That hit harder than I expected. Ryan had always been the diplomatic one in the family. "Look," he continued, "Dad's always been like this. Remember when Uncle Steve offered to help with the deck repairs and Dad nearly bit his head off? It's not you, it's him." "Then why doesn't it feel good?" I admitted. "I love the car, but every time it rains, I think about them putting buckets around the house." "Because you're not a jerk despite your best efforts," Ryan laughed. "Listen, I get why you did it, but maybe there's a middle way here." Ryan suggested I offer again, but differently this time. Frame it as a loan, not a gift. Set up a payment plan Dad could manage, even if it was just $50 a month. Let him keep his pride while still getting the roof fixed. I wasn't sure. Part of me still felt they needed to learn a lesson. "At least talk to them," Ryan urged. "This cold war isn't helping anyone." Maybe he was right. I agreed to think about it. A few days later, heavy storms were forecast for the weekend. I found myself checking my parents' address on the weather app, worrying about how their patched-up roof would handle the downpour. Friday night, the rain started. By Saturday morning, it was coming down in sheets. I tried to distract myself, cleaned my apartment, caught up on Netflix, even baked cookies. But by afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I got in the Mustang and drove to their house. The streets were flooded in places, and as I pulled onto their block, I could see why. The storm drains were clogged with leaves and debris, something Dad usually took care of before big storms. Their driveway had a small lake forming at the bottom. As I parked on the street, I saw Dad and my uncle on the roof in rain ponchos, struggling to secure a blue tarp that was whipping in the wind. Mom was in the driveway soaking wet, holding the ladder. She saw me get out of the car and froze. For a moment, we just stared at each other through the rain. Then a gust of wind caught the tarp, nearly pulling Dad off balance, and instinct took over. I ran to help. The next hour was chaos. The 4 of us battling rain and wind to secure tarps over the worst leaks. We were drenched, cold, and miserable. Dad and I barely spoke, just communicated with gestures and nods about what needed doing. Next, when we finally retreated inside, the damage was evident. Water stains on the ceilings, buckets everywhere, furniture pushed to dry areas of the rooms. The house smelled of mildew and defeat. Mom made coffee while Uncle Steve headed home. Dad and I sat at the kitchen table in awkward silence, dripping on the linoleum. Finally, I spoke. "This isn't working." Dad stared into his coffee mug. "We're managing." No, you're not, and I can help. Not because I'm better than you, but because I'm your daughter, and I can. Dad's knuckles went white around his mug. I've taken care of this family for 40 years. Never needed handouts. It's not a handout, Dad. It's family taking care of family. Isn't that what you always taught me? That family comes first? He didn't respond. Remember when Grandpa moved in with us after Grandma died? You said family takes care of their own. How is this different? A muscle worked in his jaw. That was different. Because you were the one helping, not receiving help? Is that it? Mom was hovering near the doorway, listening. I could see her nodding slightly, encouraging me to continue. Look, I said, what if we structure it differently? A loan, with payments. We can draw up terms, make it official. Dad looked up, suspicion in his eyes. You want us in debt to you? I want you to have a roof that doesn't leak. I want Mom not to have to empty buckets all night during storms. I want you both to be safe and comfortable in your own home. My voice had risen, and I took a breath to calm down. And yes, maybe I want to be able to help the people who raised me. Is that so terrible? The silence stretched between us, broken only by the steady drip from the ceiling into a bucket in the corner. Finally, Dad spoke. Your grandfather never paid back a dime of what I lent him. It wasn't quite a yes, but it wasn't a no either. I'm not Grandpa, I said quietly. Dad nodded slowly, considering. We'll talk about terms tomorrow, when it's not raining inside my house. It wasn't an enthusiastic acceptance, but it was a start. As I got up to leave, Mom walked me to the door. He's always been stubborn, she whispered. But he loves you, and he's proud of you, even if he doesn't know how to show it. I nodded, not quite ready to forgive completely, but feeling the weight on my chest lightening just a bit. Nice car. By the way, she added with a small smile. Always thought you'd look good in red. Update. Final update here, folks. First, thank you for all the awards and messages. To answer the most common questions, yes, we did end up fixing the roof along with some other critical repairs. No, I don't regret buying the Mustang. Sorry. Not sorry, it's awesome. The situation with my dad is evolving. We're talking more now, which is something. Last weekend, something happened that I never expected. Want to hear how this story really ends? The roof repairs started too, weeks after the storm. Mike and his crew got to work, stripping off the old shingles and replacing rotted wood underneath. It was worse than anyone thought. Years of small leaks had caused extensive damage to the structure. Dad spent most days watching the work from the yard, occasionally offering unsolicited advice that Mike politely acknowledged and then ignored. I'd drawn up a simple loan agreement, $30,000 for the roof and electrical work, with minimal monthly payments that would basically just cover the interest. Dad had studied it like it was a Supreme Court brief before finally signing it, his signature stiff and formal at the bottom of the page. I'll pay it all back, he said as he handed me the paper. It wasn't a thank you, but it was something. The work took 3 weeks. I stopped by every few days to check progress and bring lunch for the crew. Dad and I maintained a careful politeness around each other, like distant colleagues at a work function. The day the roof was finished, I drove over after work. The Mustang had become my daily driver, and I'd grown used to the looks it got, including the tight expression on Dad's face whenever I pulled up in it. But this time, something was different. Dad was waiting in the driveway, and as I parked, he actually walked over to the car. Want to see the finished product? He asked, nodding toward the house. I got out, surprised by the invitation. Sure. We walked around the property as he pointed, out the new gutters, the repaired fascia boards, the proper flashing around the chimney. He spoke with a pride that confused me at first, until I realized he was taking ownership of the project, making it his accomplishment too. If that's what he needed to accept the help, I could live with it. As we completed the tour in the backyard, he stopped by his shed. Got something to show you, he said, unlocking the padlock. Inside, among the organized chaos of his tools, sat something covered with an old blanket. He pulled it off to reveal an antique radio, the kind from the 1940s with a wooden case and fabric speaker cover. Found this at an estate sale years ago, he said, running his hand over the dusty top. Always meant to restore it, but never got around to it. I'd never seen this radio before, had no idea he was interested in such things. It's beautiful, I said, genuinely impressed. Needs work, new tubes, rewiring, refinishing the cabinet. He paused. Thought maybe we could work on it together, if you're interested. The offer caught me completely off guard. Dad had never invited me to work on projects with him. That was always Ryan's territory. I don't know anything about antique radios, I admitted. Neither did I, till I learned, he said with a shrug. Got some books on it, YouTube videos too. Dad watching YouTube videos? That was new. I'd like that, I said, meaning it. He nodded, seemingly satisfied. As we walked back to the front yard, he paused by the Mustang. Mind if I take a look? I blinked in surprise. Sure, want to sit in it? He hesitated, then nodded. I opened the driver's door for him. Dad lowered himself into the seat, hands immediately finding the steering wheel. His fingers tapped the leather, thoughtfully. Had a 67 fastback when your mom and I first started dating, he said. Blue with white racing stripes. This was news to me. You never told me that. Sold it when we found out your mom was pregnant with Ryan. Needed a family car. He adjusted the rearview mirror. This is nice. Different, but nice. Coming from Dad, this was equivalent to gushing praise. Want to take it for a spin? I offered, surprising myself. His eyes lit up for just a second before he shook his head. Nah, shouldn't. Why not? It's just a car, Dad. He looked at me then. Really looked at me, maybe for the first time in years. It's not just a car to you, though, is it? The question hung between us. He was right. It wasn't just a car. It was freedom, independence, a declaration. But sitting there watching him behind the wheel, hands placed exactly at 10 and 2 like he'd taught me when I was learning to drive, I realized something else. It's just stuff, Dad. Cars, houses, roofs. They're just things. The important part is the people who use them. He nodded, a small smile playing at the corner of his mouth. Your mom always said you got your brains from her side. Well, I definitely got my stubbornness from your side. He laughed at that, a real laugh, not the polite chuckle he usually offered. Can't argue with that, he patted the dashboard. Maybe another time. As he got out of the car, he handed me the keys with a nod that somehow contained more meaning than any words could have. Mom's making pot roast again tonight, he said. You should stay. I'd like that. As we walked toward the house with its new roof, solid, secure, no longer a source of dread when storm clouds gathered, I realized we'd both learned something these past few months. Dad was learning that accepting help didn't diminish him, and I was learning that sometimes the most valuable fixes aren't the physical ones you can see. Later that evening, as we sat around the same dining table where this whole saga began, the conversation flowed more easily than it had in years. We talked about the radio project, about Ryan's new job, about Mom's garden plans now that she didn't have to worry about buckets in the hallway. And when I left that night, Dad walked me to my car. Drive safe, he said, like he always used to when I was younger. Then he added, beautiful machine. Thanks, Dad. See you Saturday for Operation Radio Rescue? He smiled. I'll have the tools ready. As I drove home in my Mustang, the car that had been both my rebellion and, strangely, the catalyst for change, I realized that sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones most worth learning. For Dad, it was learning that accepting help didn't mean surrendering his identity or authority. For me, it was understanding that real strength isn't about proving a point, but about finding a way forward together. The roof no longer leaks. The car still turns heads. But the real victory? That's the sound of Dad's laughter as we hunt for vintage radio parts online, planning our next project together. Sometimes bridges get built in the most unexpected ways, using materials you never thought would work together. But when they do, man, the view from there is something else.